Here on Arts Upload, we've shared different people's perspectives on some of our city's trademarks, the fountains.
Now, as the baseball season comes to a close, we'll see another one through the eyes of a fervent fan, who also happens to be one of this show's producers, Eric Mater.
It's the Kauffman Water Spectacular, a choice that's all the more appropriate because September 21st would have been Ewing Kauffman's 100th birthday.
Videographer Dave Burkhardt braved wind and water to put together this edition of My Favorite Fountain.
This is my favorite fountain because it just holds so many good memories for me. I come here with friends and family, and some people like to go to the mountains, some people like to go to the beach. Kauffman Stadium is kind of my happy place, and those fountains, the sound of water running is just a soothing sound, and there's nothing better than sitting in the ballpark and watching the game and letting those fountains help cheer us on. Kauffman Stadium is one of the oldest stadiums in the major leagues now, and I think it still looks beautiful. People still call it a beautiful stadium, and I think a large part is because of those fountains. I think the fountain kind of gives the stadium some personality. It kind of reacts to what's going on in the game. It can be a good sport, and at the end of the games, it'll tell the other team good game, but I feel like when the Royals win, that thing has a second gear, and it really kind of dances along with the fans. My brother and I started getting season tickets a while back, and we got tickets to the wild card game. I just remember after that game was over, a roller coaster ride of a game, a legendary game. We went out and walked around the concourse and high-fiving everyone that we could see, and we stopped off right by the George Brett Fountain and looked out over the field, and the fountains are blasting, and everyone in the stadium is still celebrating and hugging and high-fiving, and it was a fun moment. I couldn't help think that if Mr. K could bottle that kind of emotion in a pill, he'd have another bestseller. During the stadium construction, there was some worries about budget overages, and the fountains were on the list of something that could be cut. But Mrs. K was firm and saying that the stadium needed to have those fountains, and Mr. K backed her up, and that's why the fountains are here now. This is the largest privately funded fountain in the world, so we've always got a world champ right here in our home stadium.